Are the Florida Gators trying to add one last blue chip to their 2025 recruiting class?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Thursday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work for New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And like I said, the Florida Gators could be looking to add one more blue chip to their 2025 recruiting class out of high school, and it is Onis Konanbanny, the four-star cornerback that is currently committed to Tennessee. And this one was a interesting one, right? Because leading up to early signing day, there was traction, right? That the Florida Gators may be flipping Onis Konanbanny, or at least that they were trying to flip Onis Konanbanny from the Tennessee Volunteers, who Onis Konanbanny, of course, is originally from London, if I'm not mistaken, and now lives in South Carolina, but is a Tennessee commit. And I want to bring up that significance because when it was signing day time, Coach Rasul with the Florida Gators posted a GIF of London. I think it was of Big Ben. And a bunch of people were like, hey, why would he do that? That's why he would do that. Just because he was trying to, I guess, hint at Onis Konanbanny. And he's long been thought of as a potential flip target at this point because, well, a month and a half in college football recruiting is a long time, as we've come to know. And Florida is looking to him. And this is also something that we talked about a bit because Onis was deciding between announcing his decision on signing day, if he was going to stick with Tennessee or flip, but ended up pushing back to late signing day or actual signing day. And that kind of left us up in the air because, and we talked about this I believe we talked about it on the signing day live stream when he pushed back, that I was personally curious if this meant that Florida would back off a little bit. Because I thought that, and I'm not saying that this is what I thought the coaching staff would do, it was just something that I was thinking about, was that the coaching staff, if Onis Konanbanny did not flip to them, they could have looked into the portal for a corner, and if they found a corner that they wanted, then they could not pursue Onis. But they are still pursuing Onis while also looking into the portal for defensive backs, we'll say. But at 6'1", 175 pounds, Onis Konanbanny is that kind of prototypical size. It's weird. He's 6'1", and that leaves him on the shorter side of cornerbacks that the Florida Gators have recruited, which I think you could use as one. Also, I will say this. He's got length, okay? Long arms. He's an athlete. That's unsurprisingly a Florida Gator cornerback target is an athlete with long arms. Who would have ever predicted that one? But I think that at 6'1", he plays bigger than that. And I think that they're pretty much just like, hey, we're cool with it. He plays bigger than 6'1", and 6'1" is average size at corner on this roster. Maybe slightly below average at corner on this roster when you've got the Cormani McLeans, like that are trees, right? You got trees in your cornerback room. It looks like a Dan Mullen wide receiver room with how much height they got. But except, these guys are actually good. But Onis Konanbanny, being a target for the Florida Gators, is also one of those SEC and just a rival recruiting matchup that you want to win. And so even though they have looked into the transfer portal for defensive backs, both on the inside at slot and on the outside as just a boundary corner, Onis Konanbanny is still a target that they're looking at and trying to flip before we get to actual signing day. Because don't forget, he's a 2025 kid. This is going to be his freshman year. This is not one, because in a couple of minutes, we are going to talk about some 2026 Florida Gators commits. And those guys we'll talk about in a few minutes. But right now, we're talking about Onis Konanbanny 2025. He will be there this fall. He'd be on, I don't know if he would be an early enrollee at this point. I don't imagine he would be. Because don't forget, you could be an early enrollee and not be there day one of camp and day one of workouts, right? You'll still have that time to enroll in the university and do there and go there. So that wouldn't be decided. But I also will say this, because we're going to have this conversation every time Florida brings in a blue chip talent, which is something that they do pretty often. I mean, look, we can joke about the blue chip Billy nickname, but they do get a lot of blue chips. This year was probably their worst blue chip ratio that they've had in a recruiting class, and it still was pretty good. So, yeah, they get blue chips, and they do that a lot. And when you get a blue chip player at any position, that opens the conversation for, well, are they going to play early? And a lot of people think that, if you don't play early, you're not a good recruit, which is just complete BS. I just get that out of your mind. And I will say this. I don't think Onis Konanbanny would play early, partially because if he's not an early enrollee, he'd be joining in the summer and trying to learn the defense and all that. But it's possible, considering that this cornerback room right now, kind of an unknown, right? Obviously, we've seen the guys play, but have we seen them play significant snaps consistently, like throughout the course of a season? Not really, right? It's Dijon, and that's where the list starts and ends. Like right now, at corner, you've seen Dijon played almost 500 snaps at outside corner. Jason Marshall's gone. Triquez Bridges is gone. Those are your guys who play the second and third most snaps at corner this year. Devin Moore, constantly hurt. Cormani McLean, we'll see what happens with him, but he played under 100 snaps at boundary corner or outside corner. Jakeem Jackson's gone. Teddy Foster and Jameer Grimsley were true freshmen. This is a very unknown cornerback room. You've got Dijon, you've got Devin Moore, and you kind of know what they bring to the table. But even then, will Dijon be able to do it again? What will his development look like? And for Devin Moore, will he be able to stay healthy? Those are the biggest questions. But for Onis, there's a path to playing time. I just don't think he would get it. I do think that you'd be more likely to see a Jameer Grimsley or a Teddy Foster take over there and Dijon take the next step. Like, I would love it. And also Cormani McLean. I would love it if there was, honestly, and I know that I think some people will love this, some people hate this. I would like to see less rotation at corner for the Florida Gators. I would, just because I would like to have a corner where you go, we can't take him off the field, which is kind of what Jason Marshall was like, right? Like Jason Marshall played the second most snaps in the entire season at outside corner, and he played half the season. He played 7 games. That was it. He played 96 less snaps at outside corner than Deshaun Johnson, and Deshaun Johnson played 6 more games. So Jason Marshall was doing that. I would like to see that more often. Like I'd love to see the Florida Gators have a guy where you go, hey, we can't get some of the young guys snaps because we're not taking him off the field. And so maybe Onis plays, maybe he doesn't. I don't think he would, but the door is still open for playing time if you're a cornerback and you're coming to the Florida Gators. It's there. We're going to be honest about it. We are about to talk about some 2026 Florida Gators commits that are visiting other programs in the coming weeks when we get back with Locked On Gators. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite things to do, especially during the NFL playoffs, because during the NFL playoffs, it's the only game you're looking at. You watch it every snap, as opposed to like red zone. And I'll go every drive. I'll have some kind of bet. The Rams-Vikings on Monday night, for the first 3 drives, cashed Tyler Higbee to catch a pass. And all 3 times he was above plus 180 odds. So I think the first one was plus 260 and then like 210 and then 185 or something like that. I bet it on the fourth drive as well, but he got injured and did not play on that drive. So that got voided. But it cashed all 3 drives. He was healthy. I'm just saying. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And the Florida Gators have 2 2026 defensive back commits. While we're talking about DBs, let's do it, right? I have 2 Florida Gators commits for 2026 that are going to be visiting elsewhere in recent weeks. Both got announced within the past 7 days, if I'm not mistaken. 2026 cornerback Jaylen Seatbelt Waters, which, by the way, hell of a nickname. It is. Seatbelt's just the coldest nickname that you could have. It just is. But unanimous blue chip across the board. Supposed to visit Miami this weekend. In-state kid. This is going to be a battle where Miami's not going to stop recruiting him. He was one time committed to Florida State. They're not going to stop recruiting him. He's been a Florida commit since summer of 2024. I think it was June in 2024 that he committed to the Florida Gators. And although he's a unanimous blue chip corner, I am very much expecting his rankings to keep rising. I mean, look, you look at the film, big fan of it. Like kid's just a killer outside. And I know there was a tweet that went kind of viral from him last week of just him moving in drills. And people were like, that movement's crazy. Yeah, he's got elite physical traits. Okay? Elite physical traits, physical at the line of scrimmage. He's a guy that you want to put on an X receiver, which X receiver generally thought of as the big guy, right? Like you want the big guy that's fast and can separate. You want to put Jaylen Waters on that kind of guy. Like you want to have corners that can match up with that guy. And you go, yeah, bring it. Like we're cool with it. And so he is supposed to visit Miami this coming weekend. I expect his recruiting ranking to keep rising. Just film don't lie, right? Film don't lie. Hell of a football player. And as far as the potential for a flip, if he is ever going to flip, I don't think it would be this weekend. Just because, you know, he's been committed to Florida State one time before. He's committed to Florida. I don't think anybody wants to be the person that's committed to all 3 schools when you still got basically a year until early signing day. So I do think that if there would be a flip, it would happen way down the line. Also, as everything Jaylen Waters has ever said, loves Florida, loves Billy Napier, loves Will Harris. Once he got an offer, they immediately got to the top of his recruiting list. And once he got a committable offer, he committed to the Florida Gators. So I don't feel too scared about this one, if we're being completely honest. At least not at this moment. Obviously, things can change. It's going to be a very long process for the 2026 recruiting class. But when we talk about building blocks, which we will always talk about, and we will talk about shortly in a couple days probably, about building blocks of your program, you go QB, wide receiver, offensive tackle, pass rusher, and corner. You've got a blue chip corner for 2026. You want to have at least a blue chip, at least one blue chip at all those positions every single year. And Jaylen Waters is that right now. Like he's there. So when we talk about a building block, that's it. That's why I say the significance of keeping him very important. But that also then on the flip side of it, the significance of other programs trying to poach him, you got to be in high demand. Another Florida Gators DB for 2026 that is committed to the Gators that is going to be visiting elsewhere is 3-star safety commit Devin Jackson, who Devin Jackson announced yesterday that on February 1st, so not this weekend, not next weekend, but the weekend after, we'll be taking a visit to Nebraska. 6'2", 185-pound safety. I mean, again, this is the kind of guy, Jaylen Waters also around 6'2". these are the guys that we talk about where we say, hey, Onis Konanbanny at 6'1" is kind of short for a Florida Gators DB target. Yeah, that's Devin Jackson is at 6'2". I think that he would be playing more of a deep safety kind of role with the Florida Gators, which who knows what the scheme is going to look like in 2026 because that'll be 2 seasons away. But I think that he'd be playing more of a deep safety role than anything else. Again, 6'2", 185 just means you need to gain a little bit of weight there. But I don't know if his recruiting ranking will climb. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched as much film of him as I've watched of Jaylen Waters, just because, blue chip corner. I'm going to watch it. But I will say that perhaps this is one of those times where you look at a recruit, then you look at his recruiting ranking, and then you look at the offer list. And the offer list for Devin Jackson, not a 3-star offer list is what we'll say. He's got offers from Georgia, LSU, Missouri, Texas A&M, Syracuse, Nebraska. There's a lot of Power 4 programs that have given offers to Devin Jackson. So this is one of those times where we will look at it and we will say, hey, I get it. Like I get 3-star, so you may not care that much, but that's a pretty damn good offer list, right? Like that's Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, teams that we are probably going to be talking about as playoff contenders, and Syracuse as playoff contenders in 2025. That's who you're competing with here, which again raises the importance of you need to win some damn football games this year and make the college football playoff. Like again, that's the expectation. The college football playoff is the expectation for me for the Florida Gators in 2025. Make the college football playoff. Devin Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, one time committed to Syracuse, now Florida Gators. And he was one of 2 that flipped. One flipped back, but it is what it is. But Devin Jackson visiting Nebraska, if I'm Billy Napier, I feel fine with it right now. Obviously, wouldn't feel too comfortable with allowing him to continue go visiting elsewhere, but hopefully get another kid to shut it down as quickly as you can. We are going to finish today talking about the Florida Gators basketball team because on Tuesday night, they frustrated a lot of us, right? The post-game live show was fun to do, not fun to talk about. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Gators. This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of the football action. And now that it's playoff time, there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your pick hits, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. I didn't misspeak. Up to 1,000 times your cash just by making a few simple picks. It's wild. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. You can lose. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we're going to talk about this Florida Gators basketball team for a little bit because they drove me freaking crazy on Tuesday night. If you are unaware, if you don't follow basketball, welcome. If you didn't know that we talk about basketball here, welcome. But the Florida Gators hosted the Missouri Tigers and lost an ugly one. And by ugly one, I just mean the game itself was pretty ugly. You lost by 1, which let's get this one out of the way. I don't care too much about the referees missing that call where I think it was Caden Grill's foot was like barely on the line, which should have made a 3-pointer or a 2-pointer. I get it. It happened. It sucks. It should not happen. But at the same time, I am also the kind of person who I will say 2 things. 1, I don't blame officials for the results of games because guess what? Maybe play better defense in the first half of the game. Maybe play better offense in the first half of the game. right? Like just maybe be better at that point. But you weren't. So yeah, it sucks that they missed that call. That was a 1-point swing and you lost by 1. But also your best free throw shooter went 1 for 3 at the line in the final couple minutes of the game. Maybe hit a free throw differently, or maybe hit more free throws. Who's to say? But so I just can't get too mad at that. That's the first thing, is that I don't blame refs. Second thing, the referees in every sport suck. They're horrible. They're gonna make mistakes. I don't watch Nathan Peterman play football, and when he throws a pick, I go, holy crap, he threw a pick. I don't do that because it's stupid, right? Like we know they suck. We get it. They're bad at it. Graham Mertz gets sacked because he can't escape a fast edge rusher. No duh. He's not going to be able to do it. I don't get mad at things that should be expected. However, for the Florida Gators, you can't keep having games where you allow 50 points in the first half. You can't. Because if you break it down, like let's break it down into quarters, right? 10-minute quarters, 4 10-minute quarters. Florida allowed 33 points in the first 10 minutes of the game, which, congratulations, you held them to 17 for the rest of the first half, but they still had 50. And in the second half of the game, they scored as much as they scored in the first 10 minutes. Okay? First 10 minutes of the game, they had 33 points. Second half, they scored 33 points. It's just that extra 17 got you, right? Maybe don't give up 33 points in the first 10 minutes. Didn't help that Florida kind of went ghost in that. Like at the same time that Missouri went pretty ghost scoring-wise in the final 10 minutes of the first half, Florida also kind of went ghost at that point, scoring just 14. So maybe if you only score 14 points in 10 minutes, we're having a different conversation as well there. And look, we can give Florida absolute credit for fighting and clawing and scratching their way back into this game, right? Because you were down 50-34 at the halftime. You could have just rolled over. And I don't know why I said at the halftime. At halftime, you could have just rolled over and died, right? But you didn't. At one point in the game, you were down 42-23. Yeah. 42-23. That's ugly. That's bad, right? That's horrible. And you came back and lost by 1. Again, and I know that it was Will Richard after the game was like, well, you can't just not show up for a half. You can't just not play a half and expect to win games. Then don't do it. Show up. Play. And which, again, easier said than done. But if you watch the game, there were some things that were just lackadaisical effort, which is a thing that we've seen quite a bit from this team, that you just give up on plays, or that defensively you're like, oh, I'm late. I'm just going to watch them shoot. Things like that happen far too often for this team. You can't do that. Can't allow 50 points in the first half. You can't keep shooting in the 60s percentage-wise from the free throw line and expect to win. You can't. Florida shot 67% from the free throw line. Missed 10 free throws. Lost by 1. Missed 10 free throws. Which, again, on the flip side, if Missouri made more of their free throws, sure. But if you guys shot the same percentage and you had more attempts, maybe you don't lose by 1. All right? Maybe you hit another free throw and force overtime and we see what happens there. Maybe you shouldn't have 13 turnovers, 12 of which were steals, by the way. Like that's the thing as well. Florida doesn't get steals like that. They force turnovers, but they don't get steals like that. And the significance of that is that you don't get fast break opportunities. And when Florida played Missouri, Florida turned the ball over 13 times. But guess what? 12 of them were steals. Like that's fast break points. They kill you, and they kill Florida a lot. Missouri scored 18 points off turnovers. Florida scored 6. And Florida forced 8 turnovers, 5 of which were steals. Missouri forced 13 turnovers, 12 of which were steals. Right? Like steals in different or turnovers in different ways, because they don't Not all turnovers are created equal, right? Some turnovers, you get a steal and you get a transition opportunity. Others, you force a shot clock violation, which is still great, by the way. I'll make that clear. But it's about you can't give up fast break points, or you can't give up points off turnovers and not convert points off turnovers. Okay? You can't give up threes and convert less of your threes. You can't not rebound for a half and expect to win. And that's what Florida did. At one point, they were being out-rebounded by a ton, and they were being outshot by a ton just in terms of field goal attempts, not even makes, just attempts. You were being demolished in that category because you just didn't have enough. Like, you just didn't do enough. And it was ugly, and it was bad, and it was no good, and it was very horrible. Gonna just be honest with you. Like, you can't have games like that. And Florida keeps having, you can't allow one guy to come off the bench and shoot lights out from three. I get it. Caleb Grill plays starter minutes. Absolutely. But he came off the bench, shot 6 for 10 from three. Colby Brea 2 weeks ago shot 7 for 9 from three. You can't let these things continue happening and then expect to win games. It's just not going to work that way. Can't have one of your key players with 4 fouls in the first quarter or first half. This team does things where you can look at them and you could say they're national championship contenders. But then they also have games where you watch them and you think they're not going to show up in a tight game that's meaningful. Because they haven't proven that to you yet, right? They beat Arkansas by almost double digits, and then they blew out Tennessee by 30. So congratulations, you can win the games that aren't exactly close, but if it comes to a point where you're up 1 or 2 with 30 seconds left and you get fouled, I am not confident at this point in anybody making those free throws, even Walter Clayton Jr. He shot 1 for 3 on Tuesday night. And last Tuesday night, the Kentucky game, so the first SEC game there, against Kentucky, he shot, 9 for 13, which is still a good percentage, but it's not, the guy that's supposed to be shooting 85 to 90%, because it's not bad. And so you can't have moments like that. You can't have guys that are going to consistently shoot below 50% from their free throw line. We saw this with Tyrese Samuel last year. Drove us freaking nuts. The subtext group, we just went nuts about it all the time because Tyrese Samuel was clanking free throws. There are some flaws that this team has that need to be addressed. And look, I'm glad that they're happening this early. I'm glad that it's happening this early in the SEC schedule, in the conference schedule. Because now you've got time to correct it. Like, I'd rather have it happen now and then you figure things out, or at least have the opportunity to figure things out, instead of all of a sudden you forget how to do things in March. Rather have it happen now, and hopefully when you are slumping like you are now, hopefully you don't get into another one this season. So slump now, get into the tournament and get hot, but the Florida Gators basketball team is going to drive me absolutely freaking bonkers this year. I know it. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and we'll see you all next time.